Loud. So what we can do is just have a conversation, and what you can help me do is ask questions, just jump in. We'll just have a conversation about this. I just didn't want to cancel for this month. So let me tell you a little bit about my interest here. I am a clinician. So I am the associate department chair here, so I'm an academician, but I also have a clinical practice. I've had a clinical practice pretty much the entirety of my career. My master's practicum I did at Children's Services. So a lot of the people I worked with there were people who had lower socioeconomic status, people who had the government imposed on their lives, and people who didn't really want me there. Totally understood that.
Right.
Had some really interesting experiences there. So with the master's internship, I learned how to work with clients who, the big takeaway was people who didn't necessarily want spotlight. For my doctoral internship, I worked at a place that had really high-end clients. So these are people who you would see as local celebrities, sometimes national celebrities, and sometimes bigger. So I'm sitting here thinking, I'm this doctoral student and I'm working with this person. I know exactly who you are before you walk in the office. Wow, this is kind of weird because I'm seeing you with your hair tied up in a bun with no makeup on, or when you're not shaven, or that you just come across as a person, despite the fact that you are that person. I've seen you on TV, that kind of thing. And it was interesting to see how similar those two groups of people were. And I've had people who were in the middle too, but those two poles, those two extremes, at the end of the day, when you boiled it down, they were still people. So there's that piece. And then I'm doing this work. I work with my clients, blah, blah, blah. I've had these two different groups of people. And then one day, mysteriously, which is the color scheme here, I got a call from a football team, a pro football team. It was like, hey, we need a clinician. Do you want this job? Mm-hmm. So I already go back and forth from Toronto to Cleveland every other week. That's why I started going every week during football season, because they actually wanted me to do some work, teaching workshops, lectures, doing just different stuff. I had to clear with my job and do that. So in working there, you of course have to interface with different sports. So you get to see different people, different things like that. Put that aside, then there are two other brief things, and then we'll go through the PowerPoints. What were you about to say? You're in here twice. Now you're here once. Magdalena can't. Okay, there you are. Then I just got you back. Hey, oh, nice background.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's cool. Okay, so at the core, because I'd had these experiences working with different people who were pretty well known, not just athletes, but also people who did a couple of other things, I was thinking, this is an interesting piece. So I went back to grad school again, got a certificate in working with athletes, and learned that I'm not really learning a whole lot that I hadn't learned in practice working with these fairly well-known famous people. But at core, there are two things that have to be kept in mind when you're working with folks who are of notable status. One is they're just people. These people are just people. They have the same kind of stuff happen in their lives, in their personal lives, that anybody else can have. On the other hand, you have to remember that these are people who are in a really strange fishbowl type circumstance where they're used to everybody seeing them, watching them, making assessments. I've watched news stories and heard something about a person who was well known and going, that's not true. Like, I know that's not how that happened. I know that's not true, but there's nothing you can say and do about it. So you have to figure out as a clinician, how do I navigate in this tiny piece of this world that I have access to? Because I'm not the famous person, and in my case, thank goodness, I'm not the famous person, but I know that this person is probably struggling. I've seen things on TV where you had to make a phone call right after that and go, you all right? Like I heard this story, or things that end up on social media that aren't true, that type of stuff. So I'm not even going to go through each and every one of these slides. There are just a couple of points I want to bring up. And then as we progress through it, if there's something you really want to jump in and ask, do that. Because with a small group, which I think there's some benefits to the small group, we can just talk and then we can figure out, is there a need for a second one of these with maybe a larger group? And what kind of things can be refined? What types of things would you like to know more about as you work with folks? So we already know what mental health is. But one of the things that's interesting is in this place of mental health, we have to be aware that right now there's a whole lot more emphasis on what mental health is because we have actors, actresses, athletes coming out saying, I'm more than just my whatever my craft happens to be. With Simone Biles, it was very interesting to watch what happened with her in the Olympics because my kid's a gymnast and her biological mom was in one of my classes in high school. So I've always paid attention to her because she's an amazing athlete. My daughter looks up to her. And for her to say, I can't do this right now because I have the twisties, brought up two things for me. One is, do people understand what she's talking about by saying the twisties? And the other thing is, wow, how much pressure does this put on her, given that she is in some ways like the face of gymnastics? How does this play out for this person with all of this pressure, all of these people saying crazy things about her on social media, never having met this woman ever in life? Do you guys know what the twisties are?
I kind of had like an assumption, but no, I don't have like the exact definition.
Okay. So with gymnasts, and it's funny because I've never been a gymnast. I run, but that's it. My kid's a gymnast. And I did have to ask her, okay, so help me understand exactly what this is. Proprioception, which is something we do talk about in mental health. And if you were an undergrad psych major, ideally when you were studying neuropsych, you would have learned about the brain and the importance of proprioception. It's important to know where you are in the world. So when I stand up out of this chair, I'm assuming that I will be upright, my feet will hit the ground, I'll walk forward or whichever direction in this room I choose to walk, but I will have an awareness of where I am. My daughter, I like watching her on the bars. That's all cool. I like watching her on the floor. Like watching her on, let's see, I said floor, bars. What am I missing? Vault. Vault's okay. I like watching the vault. I cannot stand the balance beam. I hate it. And I actually noticed that toward the end, she is 20 now. So she competed up until she was 18. I actually had developed an issue with people in red on the beam. So as soon as I saw a red, it could be her gym, it could be somebody else's gym, I would instantly feel kind of sick whenever somebody was specifically on the beam. And it's because, have you ever done gymnastics, either of you?
No, but my cousin did pretty significantly.
Okay, so when you have this, it's competitive, it's a dangerous sport
Yeah.
if it's not done well, but a beam is the width of a credit card.
Mm.
That creeps me out. I remember once
Yeah.
having her coach, the coach offered to walk the moms across the beam, or that our daughters could walk us across the beam just to see. It seemed like a good idea until I got up there, and it was at FIG. So they had it raise the height that it is for competition, got up there, we're walking across it. It's very, very narrow. So I'm thinking, I'm paying somebody to have my kid do flips and tricks and all kinds of things on this hunk of wood because clearly somebody hated girls in the past. I don't know how did this become an athletic event, which of course sent me down the rabbit hole of looking up the history of the balance beam. But the thing with proprioception is while you're doing these things to keep yourself balanced, you have to know where you are in space. When you flip around, you have to know exactly where your body is so that when you go to land, you land so that your feet hit the ground. When your proprioception is off, when you're flipping, you don't know where you are. And if you actually look, Simone Biles did release a little bit of footage of what she was going through because she did go train at a separate gym apparently while she was in Japan. It looks like she's landing on her back because she doesn't know where she is. And that's because stress and anxiety can mess with your ability to have correct proprioception. So imagine if she is your client, she is this person who can do things that really nobody else can do, not the way she does them. She is amazing at her sport. Or Michael Phelps, who swims like he did not have air lungs, like he was, he is amazing. You have these athletes, Usain Bolt, you can't see him when he runs. He's just some, blur of green and yellow clothes going by. These people have mastered their craft so amazingly. Imagine that day when you are their clinician, you get the call that they can't do it. I can't do this. And imagine what it feels like to not be able to do what you have trained your entire life to do. That's frustrating. In normal people world, which they are a part of, imagine if you get up one day and you go to, actually, this happened to one of my professors. He got to work. Dr. Mark Ashcraft, he got to work And he went to call his wife, he said, and when he went to speak, nothing came out of his mouth. So he's like, he tried to talk to her again. All he could do was grunt, which completely scares her because you know who's calling. You can look at the phone and see who it is if you're calling from a cell phone or something with caller ID. He couldn't speak. So she, calls 911. They get him from the university back up to the Cleveland Clinic, which is where they went. And the test that they were given, Dr. Mark Ashcraft, who is a cognitive psychologist, he said some of those tests were tests he had created. So he's trying to communicate, I can't, not that test, because I know this test, but couldn't communicate it, but then thought about, he could write and was able to communicate that way. Imagine how frustrating it is when you cannot do what you know how to do. That's for us. We all know how to speak. Imagine you are the best at running, at doing gymnastics, at swimming, at vaulting, at skiing, at skating, at whatever, and you can no longer do it. Or imagine you are an actor and you've got this role, the role you have been waiting for. It is amazing. You can't wait and you just can't get out the bed. You can't do it. One of the people, I can share this because this person was not my client. This person was, and there's a relatively well-known clinician who preceded me professionally by many, many years in the area where I was trained. And this woman one day woke up and decided she was going to open a store. This woman's a psychologist. She's going to open a store. She maxed out her credit card. She bought all kinds of stuff. It was all in her dining room and her living room. And it was amazing. And her kid, who was the person that knew her son, said it was just shocking that she had done this. All this stuff all over the house because she was in the midst of a manic episode that everybody had always just thought was productivity. But this time it manifested itself very differently. What do we do with these clients? How do you treat this person where you've been watching them on TV or you've been watching them on sports and then they come into your office saying, please help me? How do we do that? So a lot of this stuff is based on, what is mental health? What types of things do we need to keep in mind? What is mental illness? How does mental illness affect people? It impacts your functioning. It impacts your thoughts. It impacts your relationships. It impacts your feelings and your behaviors. Every piece of you. It can impact your physical ability if all of this is impacted. Imagine you are, since we haven't talked about every sport, imagine that you are a marathon runner. Either of you run?
I used to run like when I was in high school, cross country and track. But then I went to the local university here. I played collegiate rugby there, and now I coach rugby. So obviously, this is kind of like really interesting to me.
Excellent. And we should talk about.
Sorry.
No, go ahead. You just what?
I did that running. I was very good at it, but then I got bored and then I started getting into wrestling. So I just did jiu-jitsu, mixed martial arts and all that stuff now.
Oh, nice.
That's awesome too. So, wow. I was just talking about rugby. So when we are working with athletes, I run, but I run because I just like to run. Occasionally we'll run a marathon or some 10K or something like that, but not because I'm trying to get the purse, not because I'm trying to be an Olympian, but just my own weekend warrior. I run every day, but my own amateur running still has some stressors attached to it. I know what my times should be. I know how long it takes me to do this many miles. I know what that looks like just for me. So imagine when there's something attached to it that creates a whole identity, both professional and personal, for this person. You've both been runners. I'm a runner. So imagine you decide you're going to run, let's put us in a half marathon. I don't think that's the hardest race to run if you are a runner, but you are doing it. So if a person is running and they're just not making their time, they know that they can do this marathon and half marathon in an hour and 45 minutes, and they finish it at 2:03. 2:03 is still a pretty good time for the average person, but not when your time is 1:45. That's terrible time. And it says something about your worth sometimes to you. When you're working with this person, what types of things might you need to consider when they come to you and they say, it took me 1 hour and 45 minutes the last time. It took 2:03 this time. I suck. What types of things do you need to keep in mind? What are you thinking? Since we are small enough to have a discussion, let's do that. Come on, what you need to keep in mind?
Can you just re-ask the question really quick, just so I can
Yeah.
reformulate my mind?
Yes. So you have a client. I'm going to make sure I write the details down. He or she, they normally finish a half marathon in an hour 45.
Yeah.
And this is a person who is an athlete,
Mhm.
but it took them 2:03
Mhm.
to finish it this time.
Yeah.
1:45 is an okay time,
Yeah.
or a person who's professional. It's okay. 2:03, not so good. For the average person, 2:03 for 13.1 miles. Yeah, okay. You're doing it's okay.
Mhm.
But this person already had an okay time, but now the time is worse.
Yeah.
What kind of issues might you face with this athlete?
Like mentally,
Maybe their confidence decreased a little bit too, and they're overthinking themselves.
Yes.
Mhm.
Confidence, overthinking. What else?
Like self-doubt in that if they're not good at this, then that may leak out into the other parts of their lives. I
Or
may
they're
not be
paying
good at
attention
this
too
now.
much to what people are saying or thinking.
Yes. So other areas of life and what people think when they see them. So they have a spectator sport that they call life. Everything they do is visible. What's one piece, and I didn't write it on the slide, but we can talk about it anyway. What is one piece that mitigates all of this? Well, actually, it accentuates this. What is one thing we need to be aware of with respect to being seen?
Can you rephrase that again?
There's another piece that we need to be aware of when we consider athletes and identity. And I'll just tell you what it is.
To treat them like normal people, like they're not, this famous person, or act like a fangirl.
Yes, that's important. Here's another piece. We have the whole, what adjective do I want here? We have the whole, let's just call it a culture of social media. And with social media, there can be some really nasty, really virulent, really hurtful things that people say about athletes. I did go through during the Olympics, since there were a couple of athletes who cited mental health concerns. There was one in particular who I went through and just read things that were being said about this person, and they were really nasty. And I'm thinking, these people who are sitting here on their couches or on their, in their chairs or wherever, writing these things, are probably never engaged in this sport, and certainly never at the elite level. This is very different than what most of us ever experience. Wow, what a horrible, hurtful thing to write about this person, and how much might that contribute to what they're experiencing? Imagine, and I think I've become more sensitive to this over the last couple of years because I have some access to a few people, and you can see both sides of it. I can read what's on TMZ, I can read what's on somebody's Reddit thread, and then I can actually hear what this person themselves might have to say, or the people who are affiliated, like some agents or people like that who might work with this high profile person. Imagine what it's like even on the other end, when people have this, oh, this person's perfect, they never make any mistakes, they're the best actor ever, the best actress ever, the best politician, the best blah, 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 and then they make a mistake. And it all crashes down fairly immediately. And people all of a sudden look at this person as if they are just trash. You were the best thing in the world on Thursday, but on Saturday you were garbage. That's hard, because at the core, just like you said, this is still a person. And these things still hurt. If any of the three of us woke up tomorrow morning and there were tons of news stories about how much damage we'd done to something, how awful we were, that would hurt. Even though we don't always acknowledge how hurtful it might be, it would hurt to know that people held us responsible for something, people didn't like us anymore. How might that impact us? How might it impact a normal person? What do you think?
Well, for me, because I come from a country full of taboos and idiocies, because that's what I call it, I feel that they do focus a lot on what people think, and that's very stressful. Yes. And honestly, my mom still does that. She's upstairs right now. She probably could hear me. She still does that. And I tell her, and I was like, I don't understand. Do they pay your bills? Are they giving you money? So why do you care? So for me, I guess I formed this little cube where nobody goes in. So say what you want, do what you want. You're not affecting me. Yes, I agree that it does affect people, but I guess I've kind of blocked it in a way that I don't let it affect me at the moment. However, you know, like later on, it might like creep in my mind, but I dismiss it. I'm like, all right, you know what? I know this is not true. I know that this is what's happening, and that's what we're doing. No more. And I just kind of dismiss it, because if you think about it too much, it does affect you.
Absolutely. You made two really important points. The first one is about, well, I'll say them in reverse order. You made an important point about forming boundaries. I've created this area that I don't let people penetrate. This is my thing. That's important. The other point you said is, do they pay your bills? And in the case of a high profile athlete or a celebrity, the answer is yes, they do pay my bills. My popularity in part is related to my financial success or my career success. So if everybody hates me as an actor, are they going to go see this movie? If people really don't like me as a singer, will they buy this song? And especially now that we are in an era that people talk a lot about cancel culture, in some ways there's some true elements to that. You can make a political move and people are like, I didn't like that he said that or she said that or they said that, so I'm not buying that record. I'm boycotting that concert. I'm doing this thing or that thing. I get that. So sometimes, do they pay my bills? The answer is yes. And even if the celebrity has made a misstep, there's still a consequence. So that part is interesting, especially given that, at least in my experience, these people who we look at as these rich people with all this access, they're the way that their money comes in is real spotty. It's not like on the 1st and the 15th they get a check. They get paid while this movie's being made. They get paid while this season is on. They get paid while blah, blah, blah. But it's not as consistent unless they have people working to manage their money in a particular way.
Right. So a lot of football players end up being broke.
Yeah. There's actually, there's an article I just read maybe a week and a half ago on celebrities from multiple sports and just how broke they are, even though they were balling in the midst of their heyday. And it's not because they didn't earn the money.
No, it's just their natural finances anywhere.
Yeah. So at least I will say, I'll give the NFL credit, because that's the only one I can really speak to with respect to sports. They really do have some very good financial people there if you allow them to do that work. You can say,
men are stubborn.
So yeah, you can opt out or you can opt in. So that part is true. If you don't allow it. Here's a case in point, and it's not even an athlete. This is a person who was very wealthy, but they weren't very well known. There's so many factors into this one. I worked with a client who was a millionaire. She was very, very young, but definitely very, very wealthy, because something really horrible happened to her, and she was able, as a result of a lawsuit, to get a significant amount of money. She wasn't even 21. So she had all of this money and she was very, very young. Her brother was also a beneficiary. So they had, between the two of them, and I think he was 21 and she's 18. Between the two of them, they had some crazy money. In 2 years, they were completely broke. And it was almost like when you hear stories about certain lotto winners who lose their money very quickly. Or
3 to 4 months. That's the statistics.
Yeah. That's what these two did. And they had each other. So they thought, between the two of us, we got this. But the attorney who had managed that, who represented them, told them multiple times, please let me get you a financial advisor. And they were like, no, we got this. They saw the world. They had the best clothes. They rented a really nice house. I'm thinking, I'm confused on that one. Like, really? Rent a house? They rented a really nice house. They want to pay the taxes on it, thinking, but okay. When they were broke, they were more financially unstable than they had been before, because they had a taste of all this stuff and they were spending at a rate that they couldn't manage. That happens with some of the high profile people we see as well. They have access to everything for a little while. But when we think about it, many of these people don't have the types of careers. Let me see, are there any more slides? We can talk about some of this without. You guys kind of have, we can need to talk about this one too. Some of these people have short careers. We don't have a lot of people who have a career like, I don't know. I read an article this morning. I think it was about Tony Bennett. how he's going to stop doing live performances now. I think he's like 95. Most people don't have that career.
It's time.
Yeah, most people don't have that where for decades you have this career. Sometimes you have a person who is like the hottest thing in the world right now. And then 2 years later, you don't even remember that person's last name unless you happen to see the highlight on TV or hear a song or you're on YouTube and the video happens to come through.
I mean, I feel like some people just do a one-hit wonder song to make money and just set themselves for life. Like some people are very smart like that. And there's some celebrities, what is his name? He has 7 kids too. I forgot his name. And then you have the guys that came up with the Gangnam Style, whatever that thing is.
Gangnam Style, yeah, his name.
They were 35 and 45, and I just found that out when they did these songs. And I said, what?
Yeah.
So they did these songs and they're set because I guess they're older, they have a different mentality. So now they just invested it the right way and then they're set to go.
You have those people too. People who go in for a reason, not for the fame.
Right.
But if you think of like Gangnam Style, it was, you saw people out there doing their little dance. Mm-hmm. You didn't hear anything more from him on a huge scale. I think he had a couple of other songs. I think it was like Psy or something like that. I can look him up. Mm-hmm. But it didn't seem like he was in it for the notoriety or the fame.
Just there to make that extra cash and then invest it.
Mm-hmm. There was a special that came on the other night before I came back up to Canada with Whitney Houston. And I saw a part of it. I had to leave to go do something, but I saw a part of it watching it with my mom. And one of the things she kept saying was, I didn't do this to be famous. I want to sing. That's something we have to keep in mind with certain high profile clients too. They don't come into this necessarily for the fame and the notoriety. They come to show off the talent that they have. I want to be this amazing singer. But then once I'm in this world, I'm seeing, and she was kind of born into that world, given what her mom was already doing, but I'm in this world and now people are focusing on me and people are offering me things and people are showing me sides of life that I hadn't really thought about. And as I get older, I'm in my 20s, I don't have mommy necessarily right there. And I've got to make some of these decisions on my own, given that I've got sync events all over the place. Everybody thinks that I'm like the best thing ever. They'll tell me whatever I want to hear. That's a challenge. And for clinicians, it's on this slide too. How might that impact a professional? What do we do when we have a client who comes in, this person is used to having their own way, and they come to you with a concern or issue and you have to share something about them that might not be the most pleasant thing. How might that feel for you, knowing that if I tell this person the truth, this might be the last time I see this person? If I tell this person a lie, I'm just feeding into what everybody else is doing. How might I handle that? Suppose there's a celebrity named ABC, and ABC is the most famous person in the world in their craft, in their field, and they are your client. And they're asking you, do I really come across as a jerk? And they do. How do you respond to this person? Do you tell them? Kinda, yeah. Or do you say, oh, people have different ways of seeing things? Or no, I think you're awesome. What do you tell this person? How might you, knowing yourself, respond to a situation like that?
I think truth is always best. But obviously you can deliver truth in a positive way versus a negative way. So there's that. And then also, I feel as though if someone asks a question like that, then they want the answer. Mm-hmm. And if they don't, then I guess they shouldn't ask it. But also, I don't think it's a good opportunity to really drill into the person, right? Like, we should be kind because they are actually trying to explore themselves and like how they fit in the world. Mm-hmm. So kind of like a combination of that. I can't tell you exactly the words I might say, but generally around that, and maybe asking them, well, how do other people, refer to you or have people said things to you and what are those things? And let's look at that as well. Mm-hmm. So not just like, what's my opinion, right? Or what do I think, but like, what is the world around you and what does it feel like?
Okay. Nice.
Yeah.
What about you?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Dennis.
Can you repeat where I was? I dazed off a little bit because I'm exhausted.
I'm sorry. If a client is a rich, famous client who's used to having their way, and they ask you, basically, am I a jerk?
Yes.
Do I suck? And they do.
I feel that there's different ways to approach it. I mean, I can tell you straightforward, hey, I do think you suck, but then that's not the professional way, not the way that you want to handle these things, I feel that I'm a person that I always ask questions, which a lot of people get annoyed at me because I'm always asking questions. I would ask, and I'm like, okay, how do you feel about people, keeping it real with you or being blunt, straightforward? Can you handle it? Is it something you want me to sugarcoat or take you slowly through the process? Until we get there and you realize what I'm trying to tell you. There's people, I'm very straightforward and blunt, and so I don't know how to sugarcoat things. However, I ask you, is this what you want? I'll figure out a way around it. So I guess I'll take it step by step.
Excellent. And so I think you both were quite right. With a client who asked me that, I would, set it up and ask them, tell me what the outcome is that you want here, because I want to be very honest with you, but I want to make sure that you're not asking me a question where you just want me to say what it is that everybody else says to you, if that's not the case. And we have to work sometimes on, you are still a person, being very real, being very honest. In preparing for this, I watched a little bit about different celebrities and experiences they've had. And I learned that Jodie Foster, kind of interesting, at a certain point, because she was doing a whole lot of commercials and a whole lot of movies, her mother pulled her out of Hollywood for a minute. She just went back to normal life. She had chores, she had stuff she had to do. And when she went back to acting, it seemed, based on what I was able to read, her mother still maintained that level of structure in her life so that she would still be a person.
Right. But that's how I've always felt. I felt like a lot of these celebrities, even when they start young, I don't understand where the parent is. Like, even when I was tutoring kids, these kids were horrible, but I didn't want to kill the kids. I wanted to choke the parent. And I'm like, what is wrong with you? So it's the same thing with these celebrities. I see these celebrities that are young and I'm like, wait, where is your parent? Like, what structure do they have for you?
There's a good answer to that. And that's actually one of the things we have to talk about when we're talking about this particular topic. So I'll talk about why I wanted to keep this slide up, but let's talk about the family and the parents. Sometimes when a person becomes famous because of their craft, be it athletics, acting, singing, whatever, sometimes when the people come in, the agents and just the profession overall, they do some things that push the parents out. And you're thinking that if not every parent, you have some parents who are like, yeah, you know what, I'm going to roll up my sleeves and be here. But many parents who don't have access to that world before their child became a part of it, don't really know what their role is anymore, because they're being squeezed out by the attorneys and the agents and the directors and the producers or the coaches or whatever happens to be going on. And it was very interesting. I worked once with a person and both of their parents happened to come in, even though this person was an adult. And the interesting piece was the parents were very different. One parent was very, very obedient in some ways to the profession. That parent believed that these people who are in charge know how to direct my child's career, and I'm going to stand back because I don't want to mess it up. The other parent had the complete opposite. This is my child. This is what I'm going to do. But that parent really had no knowledge of how the profession worked. So you had these two parents who were coming from polar opposite ends who were equally damaging to the child in some ways because they weren't parenting anymore. One was a fan and the other one was afraid. And it was really interesting to see, like, this person, this young person, they're only in their 20s. They still kind of need you because for the last 10 years of their lives, they've been in this space, this vacuous space of these people who don't love this person. They just love what this person can do for them.
Right.
That's hard because the parents do still love their kid, but they're so afraid that they'll either mess it up or that something weird will happen that they've completely changed who they are to this child. Or a young adult by this point for this person. That's interesting. Here's another point. I also worked with a girl. She was not famous, but her parent was. Her parent was engaged to somebody very famous. So mom was essentially off constantly with this person. And this 16-year-old girl was just kind of left to herself. And there were, nannies and blah, blah, blah around, but the parent was no longer parenting because she was so absorbed into this new lifestyle that she was in. And it wasn't just the money, it was the money and the fame and the fancy trips and let's go to blah, blah, blah for lunch. And it left this child alone. It put her in that same category of people who are suffering because she doesn't have a parent due to fame. It wasn't even her parents' fame, it was her mother's fiance's fame. That was interesting too. And how do we work and deal with not only that kid who's sitting there going, yeah, I was drunk all last weekend, who cares? Even though I'm in the 11th grade, how do you work with that person? And then also address mom, who is not going to hear you well, but if you piss mom off too much, you're going to lose this client. And then who does this client have? What do you do with that?
Can we choke her? No? Okay.
Good. There are a couple of legal consequences that come with choking the parents of your clients.
Well, it depends though, because do we know at what point or who decided to come and get help? I feel like if maybe the girl decided to, I don't know, overdose herself or whatever it is, I guess the parent might want to go look for help. And it depends. Would it be a group therapy, like her and the parent, or separate?
So this is what happened with her. We did have mom come in for some sessions. The reason, there are two specialties I have. One is I'm certified to work with eating disorders and I'm certified to work with athletes. And this particular person very, very rapidly lost a whole lot of weight. So if she was, let's say 5'8", she was almost 100 pounds. So she had really just dropped off the planet weight-wise. So that was why she was in therapy. So I knew we could keep her in counseling. We were trying to keep her out of inpatient and just have her do intensive outpatient and partial hospitalization and aftercare and then outpatient with me. But as long as the eating disorder was present, we knew some therapist would be involved because her mom didn't want her to die. Mom just wanted to spend her time with this person. So there was that. Dad didn't even live in the US. Because mom
I think that's difficult though, because if it was the mom that went and decided to get therapy, I feel that that's her first step to being a little bit more open-minded. So I guess, again, I would approach her with certain questions and tell her, listen, I can tell you why this happened. However, if you can't, stimulate that, we could try some little goals or some little steps for you to try different techniques or areas so that she can feel that she's paying attention to, or that she feels that she's loved and appreciated or whatever it is. So unless you want to take the other ruthless route, we can do that too.
The ruthless route?
Yeah. Where you actually tell her and get her pissed off and she'll leave.
Well, and see the line that you walk there too with this is a minor, this is a kid, you've developed a certain level of rapport with this person, and you know that it is the trinkets and baubles that mom's been introduced to with this relationship that is distracting mom away from some of the parenting that you would want mom to be able to do with the 16-year-old girl. And I do think that I know that mom's position was, she's 16, she's almost grown. But almost is the modifier we have to pay attention to, because almost grown means that she's not grown. She's not an adult. But sometimes when people are so enamored and so distracted, I guess we can use that word again, by all that fame has to offer, then sometimes that person might kind of lose their way with the goals of parenting or being themselves. There's also such immense pressure and spotlight, once again, that we have to keep aware of what that might mean too, to performance, to how people define themselves. That's significant. This particular slide, when I was looking through just different celebrities with mental health concerns, there were 3 pages that stood out for me, and I might just share my screen and show you the other ones separately, but this one bothered me. And part of what bothered me about it was primarily that first line, the line with Jim Carrey and Mike Tyson, not so much, because they are here, they can speak for themselves. But I don't know that Abraham Lincoln, even though I've read many things about how he may have had bipolar disorder or unipolar depression or whatever, I don't think he ever said he had these things. So when people don't speak for themselves and we identify them as having specific mental health concerns, especially if they existed in an era where there was stigma attached to it, that feels improper in many ways to me. And it feels like we've violated someone's confidentiality, even though it hasn't been violated, because there is no relationship where confidentiality is guaranteed between the public and specific individuals. But to share the health issues and personal health information for people who we don't even know seems like something we have to be very, very careful about. This extends to us as clinicians. Every once in a while, there'll be a person who says, oh, look at politician X or celebrity X, Y, or Z. As a clinician, what diagnosis do you think this person will have? And ethically, there's some concerns about that. What makes that an ethical concern? Being asked to diagnose people, these famous people.
Because you don't have the ability to sit down with them and have a discussion. You can't run any assessments with them. You don't have the full picture of their environment and their family that surrounds them,
yes.
As well as what's going on in their head and their relation to that environment. And so like you really just simply don't have a full picture. And so by saying this is what I think this person is suffering from or dealing with, it just is a big assumption and probably inaccurate.
Exactly. So when we do not have access to a person, we do not know the information about which we are speaking, we are ethically creating a whole lot of different infractions that we don't want to commit. So I do not know politician, celebrity, X, Y, or Z. I cannot give you an opinion, even if it's based on a news story. So if we know that this particular person just dealt with this huge personal scandal and there are bits and pieces all through the media about that scandal, it doesn't mean we have the complete picture of what that scandal really entailed. Several years ago, there's one celebrity in particular, and I think I was an undergrad when I learned this, said that some of these scandals that we hear about are staged, and they're staged for popularity. And this was before this was like a huge internet thing. This was like there were actually studios who were creating scandals. So such and such's last album didn't sell very well. How about this? Since they're such a squeaky clean person, what we're going to do is we're going to make this person be involved in like a scandal with, I don't know, sex workers. And then everybody's paying attention to this person. The scandal dies down a little bit. The next album comes out and the sales are better. So there's a psychological piece involved in some of these scandals too, which means the image versus reality, we really don't know these people. We really have no idea who these people are just by the images that are put out in the world. And we have to be aware of that. One of the people who I've worked with has such a low-key life away from, the spotlight. This person actually seems like they would have, if I didn't know them, I would think, oh, this person probably is like out partying, doing things on the weekends. They really, really, really stay home. And it's because
there's a lot of celebrities like that too.
Yep.
Like J. Cole. He lived down the street from where I used to live.
Yeah, it was just a normal person.
He is, and you don't see nothing about him.
Mm-hmm.
He does great music and there's no scandals, no nothing. So there's actually still people out there. I guess it depends on generation and how and who raised you too. So that's how I feel about it.
I think that has a lot to do with it. When I was a little kid, my dad was really good friends with some people who went on to become a pretty famous group. And we would be at the house, you could see like the Grammy on the mantle. And this is us living in Ohio. So it wasn't like something you saw all the time, but you did see it occasionally, depending on what circle you ran in. The thing that was most striking about that, and I'm glad I had that experience, is this person's kids were just kids. And when the parents are all together eating, they would turn on the hose or sprinkler in the backyard, and the kids would go outside and do the kids. They acted like kids. These were just normal kids. These are normal people. So one of the things that we have to be aware of is these things, this stigma, this understanding somebody without really understanding them, that affects a person. How does it affect us as professionals? It can affect us significantly too, because if we go in like fangirls and deal with this person, then that person is pushed further back into a world where they can't trust. Because even my doctors are asking for autographs. Absolutely crazy. I was at every once in a while for the football team, they have these events where the public can come and watch practices. Actually, it's in training camp. It's happening right now. And a couple of years ago, there was a woman. It was kind of funny to me, but it kind of started to irritate me after a while. There was one particular player that she must really, really be into. And she pulls me aside because she was closer to where I was and goes, "Hey, it's such and such here." I'm thinking, I mean, he's right there. What do you mean it's such and such here? Because if you want to take a picture with your phone, that's fine. And she goes, "Can you get me an autograph of him?" I don't do that. Why would I do that? That makes no sense. I tell her, and then the story started to change. This person had a child who was dying and all kinds of stuff. So if that really is the case and you really need all that, then you need to go to front office and find out through the PR people how you can get this particular player to perhaps sign an autograph for you, but it won't be me. And what I've had to learn from that experience is when somebody sees you as adjacent to this high profile person, you become a target as well. Somebody might be standing by your car asking you questions. People might have questions for you about this famous person that you don't want to answer and that you really can't answer even if you want to, because you have lots and lots of reasons that legally you might not want to break confidentiality. That's important to keep in mind. And not just with the person themselves. You might be seeing a family member of a person. There are all kinds of things you have to keep in mind when working with high profile people, because while they are still normal people, there's an extra layer that comes with them, the scrutiny and how public opinion impacts their ability to actually earn a living. So imagine you did break confidentiality, you did violate any agreements or non-disclosures that you may have signed, and things come out. How might that affect your career? What might that do to you?
You could lose your career. You could be in court battles for quite some time, lose your license with the board, state board, and then of course, once other clients or other folks hear about it, then
credibility
could lose clientele in general.
Yes.
And then also just eventually or immediately you will feel remorse, feel guilt, feel negative feelings, which will affect how you view yourself. So it's kind of like a multiple part problem.
Yes, exactly. So 2 more things I want to cover in these last few minutes. One is, how might this affect your ability to be on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook or anything? How might this affect your appearance in the world?
But okay, so this is very true. So that's something that I'm still, I guess, managing myself, because I have a personal life, but then I also have a professional life. So even I have just one Instagram, one Facebook. I don't post anything. I post one picture every year, right? But currently, because I took on a part-time job because I like to bartend on the side, I have to take on a new image. So I have to take pictures, and I guess I would create, but I don't know if that makes sense, to create another one that's for my professional and another for bartending, because they could take pictures from that side, and I don't know, it's weird. I don't know. I'm still trying to figure that out myself.
So there are a couple of things. One is you have to always make sure you consult the code of ethics to see what can I do, what can't I do. For instance, I can't friend my client. I can't friend my client. And I wouldn't want to anyway, because that's so blurry, but ethically I can't. And every once in a while I'll get a friend request on one of these different platforms, and I'll have to tell the person, it's not about you. Ethically, I cannot do this. My profession says that I can't do this, which lets you off the hook, because sometimes you might not want your clients to see what went on at your child's birthday party. You might not want them to see what happened at your sister's wedding. You might not want to blur those parts of your life. So that makes a lot of sense. The other thing is, you might not want your friends to know who your clients are, and you'd be blending these two worlds. So some professionals, if they have to have a professional page and a personal page, one of those names would be different. Like maybe I'll use my middle and last name instead of my first and last name on this one so that people can't so easily find what I'm doing. Or maybe I'll alter the name in some way to not connect those two sides. The last point I want to make, so I think we're decent on time. One of the things that really made me stop posting, and I had to take a break from it, was because I ended up with a person who was, for lack of a better term, really stalking what I was doing. And that had more to do with not a high profile client. It had more to do with sometimes you get to make media appearances. Sometimes you get to do these things and a person might see you and kind of fixate on you. And when you are the person seen as maybe not high profile, but higher profile than maybe the average person, sometimes you might get somebody who pays attention to you differently, think that they know you in ways that they don't. So being a bartender, being a coach or a trainer, absolutely. You might have that one person who latches onto you a little bit differently, and you have to be very careful about that. And it was even for the Chicago school, the chair at the time was actually giving me some suggestions on what I might do, and shared some experiences that she had heard about previously for how to just make sure that you're safe, because it went on for a little while and it's disconcerting. So if that's just little me, imagine what that's like for somebody with an even larger profile and how much anxiety might be resultant from that. One of the things that I looked up too, I think they might still be up. Stop sharing the screen just really quickly. And then feel free to ask any questions that you guys have. I looked up just Black celebrities and mental health, just to kind of see what would pop up. And wasn't too surprised because most of these I already knew about. And I picked Black and Latin celebrities on purpose, just because these are two groups where only recently are we starting to hear more about just mental health. Although Alicia Keys kind of surprised me until I read it. But when we're looking at, I knew about Michelle Williams, I knew about Brandon Marshall, I didn't know about Alicia Keys, but it was interesting to see some of these people who were actually willing to say, yeah, I was actually looking for her, so I was glad to find out what happened to her. Okay, we see these people who are more famous, who have shared issues that they've had with mental illness and needing support. And looking at Latin celebrities, I think, yeah, Selena Gomez, kind of knew about her. But it was interesting to see these different people because this is an important one too. She lost her voice, so that's how she makes her money.
She did, and it was bad for a long time.
Yeah, and we are definitely a Shakira house, so that's an interesting. I understand.
She was a rocker before, and then they changed her personality to completely something different. That's when it happened.
Mm-hmm.
I said, wait, you were doing rock, what happened?
So and I'll stop sharing in a second. I didn't know about that though with her. But it's interesting to see these communities of people who are considered minority groups where things are not often focused on the health experiences. That doesn't mean because your group's not focused on that there are no concerns. It just means that there aren't supports out there that are readily available necessarily because
They try to hide it like it's a bad thing from these celebrities because, oh my God, if you have this, people are not going to like you. No, it just shows that you're more human.
But people used to see it as a weakness. So
yeah, it's really not. Telling you taboos, it's annoying.
It is annoying. Somebody told me once when I was a kid that depression was a choice. And I used to wonder who makes that choice. I was like, you know what? This sunny outside, I think I'll be depressed. It didn't make sense. But the person who told me that, who also identified as a person of a minority group, believed it. So it made me wonder if this is how you were raised, if this is what you believe.
Well, it depends though, because I feel that people still get it confused between depression and sadness. And it's annoying to me because I'm depressed. And I'm like, okay, what are your symptoms? And I'm like, you're not depressed, you're just sad. So you can't be calling sadness depression. Now it's just a thing. Oh, I'm depressed because I'm sad. No, it's not how it works.
There are a couple of those. I remember somebody saying that somebody was so skinny, she must be bulimic. I was thinking, that doesn't actually make sense to my eating disorder trained ears, but we'll just let it slide for now and explain it to you as you go. And I think there's a lot of confusion between schizophrenia and dissociative identities. There's so many places where people just don't really have the education that we would want people to have, because health is something we all need to focus on.
Yeah, but it's something that's been hidden. I mean, I guess because how do I now that we have more technology, we're able to more like inform people. However, this wasn't the case before. And like in my country, seeing a therapist or counselor or psychologist was such a bad thing, because 20 years ago, they would try to live your life or monitor your life and like put you against your family type of situation, you know? So it was different. So even now, for me to try to get my mom to go to therapy is a hot mess, because she still believes that. And I was like, Mommy, things changed, you know, but that's a thing too, because of that situation happened before, people are still iffy about it. However, now because of technology, we're able to like showcase more stuff and teach people, and then maybe open their mind like, okay, you know, maybe this isn't what it is.
You make another good point. Technology actually now allows us to enter into people's homes. We're all in each other's space right now. And that person who might have been more reluctant to get in their car or have their driver bring them to your office can now just do this straight from their space. They can do it straight from that room that feels safe in their house, or from their office, or during their lunch break, if they have that kind of job, or they can do it a little bit differently. And now that we're starting to look into legislation that allows for portability for telehealth, you might have that client who's not even anywhere near you geographically, but they really want to work with you for whatever reason they want to work with you. And that is more of a possibility. So we are seeing very quickly the evolution of our field. And it also allows us to normalize people. If the three of us decided today we wanted to have our own show and we wanted to open up our own show on a YouTube channel, we can do that right now. So it actually kind of neutralizes what celebrity is and what it isn't. We can have people who are Instagram famous, which is funny that you can be Instagram famous versus famous. Makes me laugh a little bit, but that's a thing. So we have so many different variables that are coming at us with full force and speed. Imagine how much faster that speed comes at the person who is that Instagram famous person. Or I think Instagram models are another thing that kind of makes me laugh a little bit. But these people who have this little bit of notoriety or a large amount of notoriety, they still will need counselors. And we need to be sound enough to manage and understand in as non-judgmental as possible a way how these stressors really do affect these athletes, these actors, these models, these podcasters, these whomever these people happen to be. It's creepy to walk down the street and somebody knows who you are, but you don't know who they are. There was one athlete in particular who was really, I remember him coming and saying that there's a reporter who just is always by his car. That's creepy. He was like, no matter where I park my car, this person is always there. That's stalkery. Yeah, and how you frown, I frown too. Just, he wasn't talking to me specifically. I was in the area. That's creepy. I don't want to go to my car and some rando person is just always at my car, no matter where I am. How do you know where I was? That's scary.
Yeah, I'd start looking under my car and seeing if there's a tracker on it or something.
Well, yeah, because I'm always here.
If it happens to regular people, imagine to them, because there's sometimes somebody's always staring at you. So you could go in your car and putting stuff in your car so you could leave and take your car. Imagine them. Oh God.
A client of mine who was not a famous person had an ex-spouse now who actually put a tracker on her phone. So every once in a while, the phone would just light up. And eventually when she took it back to Apple, they had to let her know, this program is on your phone. Did you know this? She didn't know. So yeah, the idea of being pursued in the spotlight, whether it's on a large scale or a small scale, is concerning. So we wrap up with that piece. But think about it too, in some, when we are working with people who are known for whatever reason, there's a certain amount of pressure and spotlight on them that makes life very difficult or very different than it used to be for them. And then when that spotlight goes away, they are once again vulnerably in a place that is very, very difficult in many ways.
Sorry.
No problema, pero podemos escuchar. She turned it off. There she is. Okay. All right. So you guys have any questions?
No.
How did you, sorry if you explained this and I missed it. How did you obtain the position with the team?
A random call from Psychology Today profile. It wasn't even, it was the best random call I think I've ever gotten, but it was a random call. The other thing that was really cool is I had a family member, I have two family members, but had a family member who I watched him in his pro athlete career as a child. So knew that there were all kinds of weird variables that came with just his living his life. And that I think was kind of helpful in going into this, but it was a random call. I didn't even know what the network of mental health looked like for the professional athletes before this, but they each do have their own pretty well organized thing that I know was not in place back when I was a child and I was watching this relative go through all this stuff. He just kind of
dealt with it.
Yeah, on his own. So that's very different. The virtual conference that we have at the Chicago school 2 years ago, 2019, the guy who supervises me for the NFL came and he was the keynote speaker and talked about how this is a career. This is a real thing. He is the director of player engagement and it is a thing. There are so many pieces and parts that come with that job for any sport. And it's actually quite interesting. So that is an area of counseling. And many of the counselors who work for the NFL are LPCs. So it's kind of a nice thing to know that it's possible.
Yeah, definitely. That kind of leads me to my next question. Where did you get your certification?
And see, that's how she and I actually started the conversation. I actually did it through a school. California University of Pennsylvania has a certificate in athlete mental wellness. And I thought it was okay. I think that would be something that would be useful for us to offer if students were interested. I've talked to our chair a little bit about it, but I think a certificate in athlete and high profile clients, because working with the athlete that's great. But what about like the coach or the team owner or the pop star or the podcaster or these other people who also have high profile jobs who also are very well known? So the athlete piece is specific to performance and the mental health piece, but these other things could be too. So just kind of feeling it out and seeing, would this be something that would be worth looking into? Would this be something that students would say, hey, yeah, let me look at these for classes. How might this help my world?
Yeah, or even also maybe like continuing ed, because I know that's, something that needs to happen, and that might be a great thing to kind of tack on.
And when you do continuing ed, sometimes these certificates, like that certificate I did, it actually counted for continuing ed.
Yeah,
cool. You still get credits. But one of them, I guess I can wrap up with this one client I worked with, her dad was the president of a really large bank. That puts him in that same category to me as the athlete and high profile client, because if I'm some kind of like extortionist of some sort, I guess I could extort this athlete, but wow, extorting the president of this huge bank corporation, I get way more money from that than this. And I really hadn't thought about some of the bumps that you run into when you have those types of jobs as well, where only certain people know who you are, but there are people who know who you are. So it wasn't Chase Bank. I don't know much about Chase Bank. I can't tell you who is in charge of Chase Bank, but somebody out there knows. And that person might be a target in ways that we might not realize when we're walking down the street next to this person, just thinking this is another person out on the street. Somebody else sees them very differently. We have to be aware when we're counseling people, when we're working with people's health, there's so many variables to be aware of. Yeah. So what I might do is do a second one of these. The person I was going to have come speak today is working. with one of her clients. So I might do this again with some of the same information, but allowing her to talk about what is it really like to have to be the agent of somebody who's doing this thing that is very different than what most of us do, and how that person is still a person.
Where would that be posted somewhere?
Just the process. Yeah, it's every month. It's normally the first weekend of the month, but not having a computer that wanted to cooperate last week, we just kind of moved it to this week. Next month, we're talking about, I believe we're going to talk about issues that face people who immigrate.
Okay.
So we will be doing September, so maybe October we'll do the second part of this one. But yes, it'll all be posted.
Okay, cool.
Great. Thank you both for coming. This is recorded, so you can go back and watch it if you'd like to. And then hopefully October or November, we'll do the second part of this one, and maybe we'll promote it a little bit differently, as long as we have a working computer.
Yeah, I could see it being really great in the residency as well. It's a good topic to learn, like a specialized thing that we learn.
I think it's important.
Yeah.
So if you are interested in next month, I think the person though who's doing it told me that Labor Day, I think, is the first weekend of September. So we might do the second week again, just so that people don't have to miss out. So we'll advertise it appropriately. But I think next month we'll do issues that face immigrants, because when I'm in the US, I'm not an immigrant, but when I'm up here, I am. And there are certain things that you do face. And
I'm an immigrant everywhere I go.
You're an immigrant everywhere you go? There are things that, it is a different feel when you're in a space, and we'll talk about that stuff next month. But so I hope that you join us for that. I guess it might be the second Saturday again, depending on, probably because of the holiday.
Yeah, because Labor Day is on Monday, and then the Saturday would be the 4th.
Okay. So it might have to be the second one next month, but that is September's topic. And then we will either wrap this one up in October or November.
Cool.
So thank you both for being here. I'll stop our recording. If you have any questions for me, just let me know. These are usually pretty small.